Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild mini-adventure, Delia's Doppelganger Dilemma, designed by Matthew Moyer for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, Andy, Grayson, and Chris. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos de Vicente, Gilberto, Sean, AK, Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Rosh, and Lumpy Spuds. Thank you all very much for your support. Delia's Doppelganger Dilemma sounds like it would be a children's book series. In fact, I think there was a children's book series. It was all alliteration from like A to Z. What it is a mini adventure. A lot of mini adventures lately, by the way. A lot of like 12-page things I've been doing lately. This one's actually a bit longer than that, but mainly because of the battle maps. It is a quite short mini adventure for technically all levels of play, which kind of works, but it kind of works because it's very heavy on the role playing and not on like a combat or dungeon crawl, because that would be extremely hard to just scale everything that way. So, but I'm not sure really you necessarily want to scale it to extremely high levels, because I just don't see this as it's such a small event that occurs. You're just helping this one family. I mean, granted, everybody should probably help them, but it doesn't feel like the kind of thing like a tier 3 or tier 4 party would even become entangled with. So probably works better at a lower level than a higher level, but to be fair, there are some scaling notes. The actual twist and story behind the plot, I think, is actually kind of interesting. I was a bit pleased to see that the doppelganger is actually just a red herring, and there's more interesting things going on behind the scene, and it manages to wrap everything up within the span of just a couple pages. So it definitely has a nice little arc that you can get through. I don't think it's necessarily designed as a one-shot. It does have D&D Adventures League here on the cover, but I'm not seeing a lot of the AL stuff that's actually included in here, so I'm not sure if this is an official Adventures League module or not. I mean, it's got the banner, but I'm not quite prepared to call this an official AL League module. However, as much as I kind of dig the story and I dig the role-playing aspect, there is basically zero exploration involved. You're going from one dialogue scene to the next, and basically only one combat encounter, which feels extremely easy, and I'll get to that in a second. So it's very, very heavy on the role-playing, which is not necessarily bad because it's short. So it's not, if this was a full-on adventure, including a dungeon crawl and everything else, if it had very little of the two other pillars, that would be a problem. But because it's a very much almost just a quick side quest you would have, in your campaign, having it be just very heavy role playing isn't necessarily bad. And frankly, I think that's probably the thing that we see the least, is an adventure that's got a lot of heavy role playing. But as you can see, as I flip through this, the layout is just really hideous. I'm not really going to mince words about it. Like it's very ugly. It's very unattractive. The font, the way the sidebars are just kind of like boxed text looks really bad. There's almost very little artwork throughout this adventure. You can see if I'm going through two double-sided pages and not seeing a single piece of art, that's a problem. It just makes your eyes kind of glaze over. So the actual formatting and the layout and the design, I have a lot of problems with. And when there is art, it doesn't even mesh very well. This looks like it's just low res and just kind of hanging out there. So not good from a layout or design standpoint at all. I'm not sure about if the scaling works very well. And I have a major problem. So I like the twist surrounding the doppelganger dilemma. I guess I'll go ahead and get into that. So the story is a woman is apprenticed to a wizard, and she's training to be a mage, and they are teleporting to this other realm, which this one does have a realm in place, but you can obviously substitute that with whatever fits into your campaign in terms of multi-dimensions and all that, and whatever gods and goddesses are involved. They are teleported together to study this realm, and then they teleport out of the realm and leave. But in doing so, they've got some magical device that malfunctions and actually duplicates both of them. So the big twist, which I think is interesting, because in D&D, obviously, there's a lot of ways to impersonate somebody else. It can be a demon in disguise. It can be an actual doppelganger. It can be somebody who has shapeshifted, Bard, Mantle of Whispers, or just all these. There's multitude of ways that a creature or a person could pretend to be somebody else in this universe. So I think that's the interesting twist, is the players are automatically going to think about one of those things, whereas what actually happened is a magical device malfunctioned, and the senior wizard and the junior mage both become duplicated, cloned perfectly, minus, I think, an ear on one of them, which, is that a nod to Bioshock Infinite? I don't know. I think that was like a Bioshock Infinite. That was like a toe, maybe. Slight spoilers for Bioshock Infinite, I guess. They become duplicated in both realms, and then the junior mage just kind of ends up going back to her life on the farm, and basically like quits this whole endeavor and just joins back with her family. I guess she's already had the kid at that point, so she's got a family and a farm. And then the one in the realm ends up running into all these kind of issues, and the senior wizard gets killed, and she gets like captured and tortured, and she has become a barbarian warrior and like has a completely different life. And then at some point, the barbarian version, which is Delia, ends up coming back to our world and runs home. Doesn't realize, of course, that she's a carbon copy, or if the other one's a copy, that's the big twist. Which one is the real one? Which I guess they both kind of are real. And she comes back and sees the family and freaks out because she sees the other version of herself, and they attack each other. And the barbarian version from the plane ends up attacking and wounding the original. I say the OG. I don't even know. It's interesting. It's confusing in an interesting way. And then ends up kidnapping a child, which she thinks is her child, because they each think of themselves as the doppelganger or demon or whatever else. I like that twist. I think that's compelling and it's interesting. And the fact that players are going to have their assumptions. The initial twist they might think when they meet the second one, and that one is like, no, they're the witch. It's a very interesting kind of, it's a classic sci-fi trope, I think, but I don't think we see it enough in fantasy. And I haven't seen enough stories take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of like creatures and abilities in fantasy that let you basically do the same thing about which one is the real one. And then, of course, players are going to think, oh, maybe the one that gave us the mission is actually the fake one, and they're trying to get their however they work out is pretty interesting. As you can tell, it's a lot of heavy role-playing stuff. There's only really one combat scene that even occurs, which is the fact that the realm that the barbarian grew up in, the demons are still hunting her. And in tracking the barbarian version, the players unwittingly kind of unlock the way for the demons to then catch up, and then there's that kind of one combat scene. The tonal dissonance problem I have, however, is, as I mentioned, when Barbarian Delia attacks Mage Delia, she kidnaps her child, which she thinks is her child, but obviously it's also the other Delia's child, who's 4 years old, which is an extremely, vulnerable, worrisome age. And then when the players get the quest, so that the dad is kind of like haggard and looks upset and all that. So, and that makes sense that he would be very upset. I do like the way it's written that, and this is throughout all the different dialogue scenes, of which is a lot because it's a very heavy role playing. We get multiple, the dialogue scene is broken down into chunks about here are the possible questions that players could ask and here are the responses. That's amazing. That actually goes above and beyond what I usually get from any kind of dialogue sequence in an adventure that I see, which it usually is just a paragraph about, hey, here's what this NPC knows and that what they can tell the player. It's not like here's literally what the NPC says for every single question. That's actually really impressive and cool, and I like to see that. And that is, frankly, how I prep my D&D adventures, too. If I know I've got a major NPC and there's going to be a major dialogue scene, I will prep several questions of which I think, and I think of it like literally video game design, where it's like, here are the key words or events that have happened to the player that would be relevant. So you kind of anticipate, here are the questions that players would ask. and then here are my queued up responses to appear, in the dialogue tree sequence. So I thought that was really nice. I like to see it, even as hideous as this layout is with the weird like cutout just box text and all that. It looks bad, but it's fairly well written. I will say that. So I enjoyed the way it was organized. My problem is the dad takes them back to the farm, and the mom, who's had her fucking child kidnapped, is cooking dinner and just calmly telling the players about what's going on. Like, oh yeah, and this woman was, she showed up and attacked us, and I threw a magic missile, and she threw a poison dagger at me, and we both injured each other, and she ran off with my child, and, could you please get my child back? And meanwhile, I'm going to cook the players some stew. It's actually written in the descriptive text, which you can see it goes way overboard here at this point. If you're writing several paragraphs, just don't. You're not writing a novel. If for your players, they're part of the story. If you want to do descriptive text, that's great. Give them a paragraph. If whatever you need to tell is longer than a paragraph, it's too much. You need to break it up between different areas or different scenes. It is too much. You are not writing a novel. This is a D&D adventure. I think it's a trap that a lot of DMs can fall through if they're really excited about describing something. But at some point, it becomes like a cutscene, and sometimes you could use that to great effect. But if it's just like you're coming up on a farm, we don't need like 3 or 4 paragraphs here. That's way too much, and it's already a lot of descriptive text and dialogue here. But I had a major problem with the mom, the mage Delia, just calmly talking to the players and giving them the quest when her freaking child has been kidnapped. Like, these parents should be in absolute hysterics. Like, you should have found them both on the road, both completely just drenched in tears and exhaustion and still trying to follow the trail. The fact that she even has a device that she gives the party that says, oh, hey, I went to my mage friend, the original mage, who, because the copy died in the planar, but the original made it back with her. He gave me this based on the fact that we got some blood when I shot the barbarian lady, and we can track her using this. Why the fuck isn't mom already on that job? Like, this is, as a parent, I am extremely upset by this. When I read that, first of all, if you're going to kidnap a child, you have automatically gone down a dark, very, very serious, dramatic road in D&D. I'm not saying you can't do it, but that is a very, very serious thing to do. Child endangerment. I mean, a lot of video games shy away from it. Even open world games, a lot of them do not have children in it for those very reasons, because that is an uncomfortable place to go. I'm not saying you can't do it, but if you're going to do it, you need to treat it with respect and seriousness, and I did not get that from here at all. So as much as I enjoyed the main plot, I thought that was a major problem. I mean, I know people who, if their dog was kidnapped, they would be like on the road, exhausted, trying to follow this person to rescue their dog back. Like, come on. You can't kidnap a child and then mom's just sitting there making dinner and calmly telling you about this whole quest line. I'm trying not to rant too much about this, but I had a major, major problem with that. Like, my jaw fell open when I realized, like, wait, we're just going to calmly get the quest, and literally everybody's like, yeah, we'll start first thing in the morning next day, and here's the thing that you can track her down with, and please take care of that and bring my daughter back. Like, what the hell? That is messed up. Anyway, so the plot is the players, they follow the path, and it's to like a derelict ship on a beach for some reason, even though I think the farm is supposed to be in the woods. And you come across the barbarian Delia, and it's here that a number of things can happen. You can either just attack her outright, kill her, get the child back, return back, and it's very, very unsatisfying because you don't know what happened, but you can just rescue the child that way. Or you can talk with her, and it gets interesting and confusing in an interesting way because she appears to be the real deal. And what's odd here is if your players, because it technically scales for all these different levels, all the way up to tier 4, your players could very well have all the tools necessary to perform a proper interrogation. And at that point, it gets more interesting because it's not like you can hide, if you were a shapeshifter or magic or something, because a player would be able to use like detect magic or have some way of, zone of truth or all these other things that a player could do, increasingly having those abilities as you go higher up to do a proper kind of shakedown of this person. And they realize this person is actually legit telling the truth about everything. that gets more interesting, and I think it's more satisfying too, where players are like, well, what the hell? Maybe the other person was lying because we didn't do all the interrogation stuff on them. So you can go back to them, or excuse me, first of all, a portal appears because the barbarian's worried that, oh no, because you tracked me here, my tracking magic is off, or whatever explanation, and you're attacked by a demon. I don't think this is very well balanced because tier 1 you fight one spined devil, tier 2 you fight one chain devil. Those are like CR2 and CR7 or 8, I think. That's not going to work. Like, you can't have one, like a spined devil. In fact, I think the stat blocks are provided. Has 22 hit points and 13 armor class. A level 3 party is going to demolish that, let alone the fact that Barbarian Delia joins you, who also scales, and her stat blocks are provided, and she's built like a PC, so she's extremely strong at each tier. Level 4, level 10, level 16, level 20. You get a level 20 PC if you're in tier 4. That's nuts. Is this supposed to be just a forgetful fight? I mean, granted, the demons don't know the party is there, so the demon shows up just to grab her, but still, I would have an army of demons show up, or especially if this is your one combat encounter, or I need you very minimum triple, if not quadruple, the amount of devils here. I thought that was very odd that we're only getting one of each. That just did not feel very well balanced. I did like that the loot is scaled. So for every single, so the party can get rewarded from the original Mage Delia, and the reward, as well as having a separate dialogue scene for all of them, which is also kind of above and beyond what we need for dialogue scenes. But you get a different level of reward depending on what tier of play. So for tier 1, you get a Ring of Water Walking. For tier 2, Ring of Animal Influence. Ring of Regeneration for tier 3, Ring of Invisibility for tier 4. So that tells me, okay, maybe you did actually do the research to try and scale this up for multiple levels. I can't imagine a tier 4 group would be involved in this, but again, I mean, everybody, if you want to throw this at the party, you could, because everybody would want to save, a missing child, I would hope. And I think the story, because it's so role-playing heavy, could scale, but I would make that one actual combat encounter a lot more challenging, because I mean, your player's going to be long rested, and it's going to be a complete forgetful encounter, especially with having a very powerful NPC in your party. So the party, after that fight, they go back to Mage Delia. Obviously, it gets more confusing from there because they both hate each other. Again, there's a lot of role-playing notes. The solution is, of course, you want to go visit that senior mage and say, dude, what the fuck? Which, for Barbarian Delia, she thinks that mage is dead because she saw him die in the realm. Obviously, our Mage Delia knows that he's still okay, so you go and visit him, and it's just a whole nother role-playing sequence. There's no dungeon crawl, there's no battles or anything. You just go visit him, and he basically just spills the beans. He says, oh yeah, I know exactly what happened now that I see that you're missing an ear, like the device malfunctioned, and yeah, he basically just tells you everything that happened and just says, and that's kind of the climax, which is odd but bold, because typically a climax in D&D is a big boss battle. And here it is just a role-playing scene on top of a lot of role-playing scenes. You basically just learn it, and then the climax is learning this information and then trying to figure out what to do with it. Because both of these figures, they had their past few years were completely different, but they are both legitimately, technically, the mother of this child and the husband of this man, wife of this man. So the party has to decide how to handle that and how they resolve it. And there's a really, really dark note in here where if the party doesn't succeed on either persuasion or intimidation, or work out some kind of joint custody deal, that eventually the Barbarian Delia will just murder the other one and take the child for herself. So that's just a fucking terrible, awful, epilogue note that the party probably wouldn't even know about. So I'm not sure why it's even worth mentioning that. But I think that's kind of interesting and cool. The fact that you can have a climax of an adventure just be a bunch of dialogue and role playing. I'm not opposed to that at all. Granted that it was already very heavy role playing, but that's the theme of the adventure, so I'm down with that. So I think, as egregious as the early part of the adventure is, with the whole just complete dissonance between my child has been kidnapped and here's a meal and could you please take care of this for me, to the end, which I think both the women are screaming at each other that they're the right one, and it's up to the party to figure out what happened, go visit the mage, and then kind of help negotiate joint custody, I guess, would be the proper way to handle it. So I think it sticks the landing pretty well, which is which is pretty nice. In addition, we get some stat blocks for the devils that are involved, as well as the scaling for the barbarian Delia, because she is involved in that fight. Either the party can just fight, take her down, and then rescue Emma, or basically continue with the story, which is this portal opens up, and then you have to figure out what the hell this barbarian woman came from. We also get battle maps, which is not a style I'm super into. Apparently this is like proper like battle mats that you would play on a tabletop, and it was I guess scanned into here or something. I mean, it still looks decent, although we don't get separate zip files that are like higher resolution, which is a problem. As far as I'm aware, this is the only thing you get if you purchase this adventure, so you just get these little pieces of the PDF, which is not great. If you're going to do maps, please give us separate zip files with the maps as a full page thing. That is preferable. But I'm not going to really complain about it, because we do get battle maps here. They are gridded and non-gridded versions. And frankly, there's not much combat here. They give you a bunch of battle maps, and as I said, there's basically one combat encounter, which is the portal opening up and the demon coming through in the beach. So as written, unless you are extremely trigger happy, you're basically only have the one fight. So way more than enough battle maps, like cut up into multiple chunks for some reason, than you would need. So that's great. That's a plus for me. I like having battle maps, and there's more than I need. So that's plenty good. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for Delia's Doppelganger Dilemma. Pro: loot, monsters, and NPCs scale through all 4 tiers. That is impressive. I didn't think you could have an adventure that actually scaled for all levels. The solution to that is it's a very role-playing heavy adventure, and so really the only thing that scales is the one combat encounter, which is the one devil that shows up. And again, I think it's way too weak. I think you need to throw in some more devils in there. The rewards that you get scale. So there's a reward that the both different Delias can give you if you help them. And the PC herself, or NPC, Delia, actually scales through all 4. So that's actually pretty impressive. Pro: gridded and non-gridded battle maps. I like to see maps. It's not an art style that I am down with, but I'm putting that in my pro, because we get maps here, and as I said, more than enough to run the one battle encounter that's included. Pros: extensive detailed notes for major dialogue scenes. I was very impressed. So as you can see, all of these blue headings with the little kind of chat box things, every single dialogue scene, of which there are several, there's like 4 or 5 throughout this adventure, because that's basically what this adventure is, has those headers for basically anticipating what the players are going to ask, and here is an entire dialogue tree for the NPC to answer. I thought that was really cool and really helped alleviate a lot of the planning you would have to go through with such a role-playing heavy adventure. Cons: unattractive layout and design. This does not look very nice. It's ugly. I don't like the font. I don't like the layout. The background is the only thing that's kind of okay, but everything else just looks bad, and it looks bad to read. And going with that is the other con: very little art. If I can go through pages and pages without seeing a single piece of art, then that's not good. And the art that is here, it's not high quality art either. So it's not a good job. And then the final con is the tonal dissonance. I'm putting that in my con because I was very upset by that. If you're going to have a kidnapped child, you need to treat that with the respect and gravitas that is going to bring with parents. They are not going to be calmly cooking dinner while they tell you about their kidnapped child and this woman who showed up who looks exactly like the mom. Like, that's just banana pants. You can't do that. So I'm putting that as a huge con in the tonal dissonance. Final verdict: the interesting twist behind Delia's Doppelganger Dilemma helps elevate an otherwise poorly designed package. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. And you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.